This is embarrassing. This is pathetic. This is absolutely disgraceful, and I cannot believe WWE made their SmackDown general manager stand on that stage and humiliate himself in front of millions of people just to appease CM Punk's ego. Nick Aldis, a former world champion, a respected veteran of this business, a man who has held titles across multiple promotions and earned his stripes through years of hard work in territories around the globe, was forced to publicly apologize to CM Punk for doing his job, for enforcing the rules, for trying to maintain order on a show that CM Punk has turned into his personal playground where he can do whatever he wants without consequences. And WWE not only allowed this to happen, they orchestrated it, they promoted it, they made it the centerpiece of SmackDown, knowing full well that it sends a message to everyone in that locker room that if you're CM Punk, if you're the Golden Boy, if you're the guy Triple H brought back and gave millions of dollars to, then you don't have to follow the same rules as everyone else. You can disrespect management, you can ignore authority, you can create chaos and dysfunction, and instead of getting punished for it, instead of facing any real consequences, you get an apology. You get vindication. You get to stand there with that smug look on your face while someone in a position of authority grovels at your feet and tells the world that you were right all along. Let me take you back to how we got here, because the context is important, and I guarantee WWE's narrative is going to gloss over the facts that make CM Punk look bad. 3 weeks ago, Nick Aldis made a perfectly reasonable decision as SmackDown general manager. He told CM Punk that he couldn't just attack other wrestlers backstage without provocation, that he needed to handle his issues in the ring like a professional, that there are rules and procedures that everyone has to follow regardless of their status or popularity. This came after Punk had spent several weeks running wild on SmackDown, jumping people during their matches, interrupting segments he wasn't part of, causing chaos in the backstage area, and generally acting like the show revolved around him and his personal vendettas. Nick Aldis, doing what any competent authority figure should do, stepped in and told Punk to knock it off. He didn't suspend him. He didn't fine him. He didn't even threaten any real punishment. He just told him to follow the rules. And CM Punk, being CM Punk, threw an absolute tantrum about it. Cut a promo about how Nick Aldis was trying to hold him back, how management was threatened by him, how the system was designed to keep rebels like him down. It was vintage CM Punk self-righteous victim complex nonsense, painting himself as the underdog fighting against authority even though he's literally one of the highest paid wrestlers in the company with more creative control than 90% of the roster. So Nick Aldis responded by making Punk's life slightly more difficult. Nothing extreme, nothing unfair, just standard authority figure stuff. He put Punk in matches against tough opponents. He made Punk defend his actions in front of the WWE Universe. He created obstacles that Punk had to overcome, which in wrestling terms is called storytelling. It's called creating drama and conflict and giving the audience a reason to care about what happens next. But CM Punk didn't see it that way. CM Punk saw it as persecution. He started cutting promos about how Nick Aldis was abusing his power, how he was being targeted unfairly, how this was just like every other time someone in a position of authority tried to screw him over. And his fans, his cult-like following of people who think CM Punk can do no wrong, they ate it up. They started flooding social media with complaints about Nick Aldis. They started demanding that WWE remove him as general manager. They created this narrative that Aldis was the villain and Punk was the hero, completely ignoring the fact that Punk had been the one creating problems in the first place. And then last week, things came to a head. CM Punk had a match scheduled against a mid-card wrestler, someone who should have been an easy victory for Punk, but Nick Aldis added a stipulation at the last minute that if Punk got disqualified or counted out, he would be suspended for 30 days. Again, this is standard wrestling authority figure behavior. This is the kind of thing we've seen 100 times before with Mr. McMahon and Stone Cold, with Eric Bischoff and whoever he was feuding with that week, with every authority figure who's ever tried to stack the deck against a rebellious babyface. It's Wrestling 101. But CM Punk acted like this was the most unfair thing that had ever happened to anyone in the history of professional wrestling. He cut this passionate promo before the match about how he was being forced to wrestle with one hand tied behind his back, how the system was rigged against him, how he was going to prove everyone wrong and overcome the odds anyway. And you know what? He won the match. Cleanly. No controversy. No issues. He did exactly what Nick Aldis asked him to do, which was wrestle a match within the rules without getting himself disqualified. Problem solved, right? Everyone moves on? Wrong. Because after the match, CM Punk got on the microphone and demanded an apology from Nick Aldis. Not just privately backstage where they could handle it like adults, but publicly, on live television, in front of the entire WWE Universe. He said that Nick Aldis had overstepped his authority, that he had created a hostile work environment, that he deserved a public acknowledgement that he had been treated unfairly. And instead of telling CM Punk to grow up and get over it, instead of pointing out that Punk had literally just proven he could win matches while following the rules, so what was the problem? WWE decided to give CM Punk exactly what he wanted. They scheduled a segment for tonight's SmackDown where Nick Aldis would address CM Punk's grievances in the ring. And everyone watching knew what that meant. Everyone knew that WWE was going to make Nick Aldis apologize because that's what CM Punk demanded, and CM Punk gets what CM Punk wants in this company. So tonight, we had to watch Nick Aldis walk out on that stage looking like a man going to his own execution. He had a microphone in his hand and you could see in his body language that he did not want to be there, that he did not agree with what he was about to say, but he was doing it because WWE management told him he had to. CM Punk came out looking smug, arms crossed, that infuriating half-smile on his face like he'd already won before a word was even spoken. And Nick Aldis, standing in the middle of that ring with thousands of people watching live and millions watching at home, had to say the words that WWE scripted for him. He apologized to CM Punk for being too harsh. He admitted that maybe he had let his personal feelings about Punk's behavior cloud his judgment as general manager. He acknowledged that CM Punk is an important part of SmackDown and that perhaps he should have handled the situation differently. And with every word, you could see Nick Aldis dying inside. You could see his pride being stripped away sentence by sentence as he was forced to validate CM Punk's victim narrative and admit fault for doing absolutely nothing wrong. CM Punk, of course, stood there soaking it all in. He didn't interrupt. He didn't jump in with a gracious acceptance of the apology. He just stood there and let Nick Aldis grovel, let him humiliate himself, let him debase his position of authority in front of everyone. And when Nick finally finished his prepared statement and offered his hand to CM Punk for a handshake to symbolize that they were moving past this, CM Punk looked at that extended hand like it was something disgusting. He looked Nick Aldis right in the eyes and said something along the lines of, "I appreciate the apology, but an apology doesn't undo the damage you've caused, it doesn't give me back the weeks you wasted trying to hold me down, and it doesn't change the fact that you're not fit to be the general manager of the show." And then he walked away. He left Nick Aldis standing there in the ring, hand still extended, looking like a complete fool in front of the entire world. Let's talk about what this actually means beyond just this one segment. WWE just completely undermined the authority of their on-screen general manager. They took a position that's supposed to command respect, that's supposed to have power and legitimacy, and they turned it into a joke. How is Nick Aldis supposed to enforce any rules going forward? How is he supposed to discipline any wrestler or make any tough decisions when everyone knows that if they complain loudly enough, if they have enough pull backstage, if they're important enough to the company, they can just get his decisions overturned and force him to apologize? Every heel on the SmackDown roster just learned that they can ignore Nick Aldis with impunity because his authority means nothing. Every babyface just learned that if they don't like a match or a stipulation or a ruling, they can pitch a fit and WWE will cave to their demands. The entire power structure of SmackDown has been demolished because WWE prioritized CM Punk's ego over the integrity of their on-screen storytelling. And let's address the elephant in the room that nobody in WWE seems willing to talk about. CM Punk has a history of this. He has a documented pattern of behavior where he creates conflict with management, with authority figures, with anyone who tries to tell him no or hold him accountable, and then he plays the victim when there are consequences. This happened in his first run with WWE. This happened in AEW where it got so bad that he had physical altercations with executives and got fired. And now it's happening again in his return to WWE, and somehow everyone is pretending like this is new, like we couldn't have seen this coming, like CM Punk hasn't shown us exactly who he is over and over again. He's a talented wrestler, nobody disputes that. He's charismatic and he can cut a promo better than most people on the roster. But he's also a cancer to locker room morale and a nightmare for anyone who has to work with him in a management capacity because he doesn't respect authority, he doesn't believe rules apply to him, and he's willing to burn down everything around him if he doesn't get his way. The worst part about all of this is that Nick Aldis didn't do anything wrong. Let me repeat that because it's important. Nick Aldis did not do a single thing that warranted an apology. He was doing his job as general manager, which involves creating compelling television, establishing boundaries for wrestler behavior, and maintaining some semblance of order on the show. If anything, Nick Aldis was too lenient with CM Punk. Any other general manager in WWE history, from Jack Tunney to Mick Foley to William Regal, would have done far worse to a wrestler who was acting the way CM Punk was acting. They would have suspended him. They would have fined him. They would have put him in handicap matches and made his life a living hell until he learned to respect authority. But Nick Aldis took a measured, reasonable approach, and for that he had to apologize on live television while CM Punk stood there acting like he'd just won some great moral victory. The reaction from the live crowd was telling. There was a mixed response when Nick Aldis came out, some cheers because people generally like him as a performer and respect his in-ring career, but also some boos because the crowd knew he was about to bow down to CM Punk, and nobody likes watching someone get humiliated. When CM Punk came out, he got his usual loud reaction. His entrance music still pops the crowd because, love him or hate him, people care about CM Punk. But when Nick started apologizing, you could hear the discomfort in the arena. Some of CM Punk's hardcore fans were cheering, celebrating that their hero was getting his vindication, but a lot of the crowd was eerily quiet because they could sense that something was off about this, that they were watching something that felt wrong even within the context of wrestling storylines. And when CM Punk rejected the handshake and disrespected Nick Aldis even after getting the apology he demanded, there were audible boos mixed in with the cheers. Even CM Punk's own fans couldn't fully support that level of disrespect towards someone who had just humbled himself. Here's what really gets me angry about this situation. WWE has spent years, decades even, building up the idea that actions have consequences in their universe. If you break the rules, you get punished. If you disrespect authority, there are repercussions. If you can't control your temper or your behavior, you face suspensions, fines, handicap matches, all the tools that authority figures have used forever to maintain order and create drama. But with CM Punk, all of that goes out the window. CM Punk gets to do whatever he wants, and when someone finally tries to rein him in, that person has to apologize for doing their job. It's inconsistent storytelling, it's bad booking, and it's completely unfair to every other wrestler on that roster who has to follow the rules and deal with the consequences when they don't. What message does this send to someone like LA Knight, who's been grinding for years trying to get opportunities? What does this tell someone like Austin Theory or Grayson Waller or any of the younger talent who are told they need to pay their dues and respect the business? It tells them that none of that matters if you're CM Punk, that the rules only apply to regular wrestlers, and that if you're special enough, if management loves you enough, you can get away with anything. I want to know what Triple H was thinking when he approved this segment. I want to know if this was his idea or if CM Punk demanded this and Triple H felt like he had no choice but to give it to him. I want to know if there was any pushback from anyone in creative, if anyone said, hey, maybe making our general manager look weak and pathetic isn't the best long-term strategy for our on-screen authority structure. Because if nobody raised those concerns, if everyone just went along with this because CM Punk wanted it, then WWE has a serious problem with their creative process and their willingness to tell their top stars no when necessary. Authority figures in wrestling need to be credible. They need to have power that feels real even though we all know it's scripted. When you undermine that authority the way WWE just did to Nick Aldis, you create a power vacuum where nothing feels like it has stakes anymore because we know the rules can be changed on a whim to suit whatever storyline or whatever star needs to be protected that week. And let's talk about Nick Aldis for a minute because he's the real victim in all of this. Nick Aldis had a great career before coming to WWE. He was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion for over 1,000 days. He main event pay-per-views. He carried that promotion during a very difficult period and helped rebuild some legitimacy for that historic championship. He's a solid worker in the ring, he's professional, he's respected by his peers, and WWE brought him in specifically to be SmackDown general manager because they wanted someone with credibility, someone the audience would take seriously in that role. And in less than 6 months, they've completely destroyed that credibility. They've turned him into a pushover, a weak authority figure who can be bullied and intimidated and forced to apologize by any wrestler with enough popularity or backstage pull. How is Nick Aldis supposed to feel about this? How is he supposed to come to work every week knowing that his character has been completely emasculated, that his position means nothing, that he's essentially a placeholder who exists only to give CM Punk someone to push around? The apology itself was painful to watch because you could tell Nick Aldis was struggling to deliver lines he didn't believe in. His tone was flat. His body language was defeated. He looked like a hostage reading a prepared statement, hitting all the required points but with no conviction behind the words. And that's probably because Nick Aldis the person knows that Nick Aldis the character didn't do anything wrong, and being forced to pretend otherwise for the sake of CM Punk's storyline had to be incredibly frustrating. Wrestlers talk about having to do the job for someone else, meaning losing to them or making them look good even when you don't want to, and this was Nick Aldis doing the job for CM Punk in the most humiliating way possible. He had to sacrifice his character's integrity, his authority, his dignity, all so CM Punk could have a moment where he looked powerful and vindicated. What happens next is going to be fascinating to watch because WWE has written themselves into a corner with this storyline. If Nick Aldis continues as general manager but is now established as someone who can be pushed around and disrespected without consequences, then his character is worthless and the position means nothing. If WWE tries to rehabilitate his authority by having him stand up to someone else or make tough decisions going forward, it'll feel inconsistent because we just watched him apologize to CM Punk for doing exactly that. The only real option that makes any storyline sense is for Nick Aldis to snap, to have enough of being disrespected, and turn heel by abusing his power and targeting CM Punk with increasingly unfair and draconian punishments. But even that's problematic because it would make CM Punk the babyface victim again, which is exactly the role he's been playing all along and exactly what WWE just validated by making Aldis apologize. CM Punk's character is supposed to be a rebel, an anti-authority figure who fights against corrupt or unfair systems. That character works when the authority actually is corrupt or unfair, when Mr. McMahon was trying to screw Stone Cold out of the championship for no good reason, or when Triple H was using his position to protect himself and his friends. But Nick Aldis wasn't corrupt. He wasn't unfair. He was just trying to maintain basic order and enforce basic rules that apply to everyone. So CM Punk rebelling against that doesn't make him a hero, it makes him a spoiled brat who thinks he's above the rules. and WWE forcing Nick Aldis to validate that perspective, to admit that he was wrong for trying to hold CM Punk to the same standards as everyone else, completely inverts the dynamic in a way that doesn't work. You can't be a rebel fighting the system when the system bends over backward to accommodate you and apologizes when you complain. That's not rebellion, that's privilege. The online reaction to this segment has been predictably divided. CM Punk's fans are celebrating, acting like this was some great victory for their hero, posting clips of Nick Aldis apologizing with captions like "Punk always wins" and "This is what happens when you try to hold down the best in the world." But there's also been significant backlash from fans who see this for what it really is, who recognize that WWE just undermined their own storytelling to appease one wrestler's ego. People are pointing out the double standard, asking why CM Punk gets away with behavior that would get anyone else punished. People are expressing sympathy for Nick Aldis and frustration that his character has been made to look weak. And people are questioning whether Triple H's obsession with making CM Punk happy is worth the damage it's doing to other characters and storylines. Because at the end of the day, wrestling is an ensemble product. You can't just prioritize one person at the expense of everyone else without consequences to the overall quality and coherence of your show. I hope that backstage, in real life, someone is having a conversation with CM Punk about his behavior and his attitude, because this pattern cannot continue. This is his second chance in WWE after burning bridges the first time, after burning bridges in AEW, and if he continues to create problems and demand special treatment, eventually even Triple H's patience is going to run out. There's a limit to how much disruption and dysfunction any company will tolerate, even from a talented performer. And while CM Punk is valuable to WWE, he's not irreplaceable. The company survived without him for 7 years. They built new stars, they created new storylines, they evolved and grew and thrived while CM Punk was gone. They can do it again if necessary. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. Hopefully someone can get through to CM Punk and help him understand that being a team player, respecting the people you work with, and following reasonable rules isn't weakness or selling out, it's just being a professional in a collaborative business. As for Nick Aldis, I genuinely feel bad for the position WWE has put him in. He signed up to be SmackDown General Manager thinking it would be a good role, a way to stay involved in wrestling and use his experience and knowledge to help make the show better. Instead, he's become a prop in CM Punk's storyline, a punching bag who exists only to make Punk look strong and vindicated. That's not fair to Nick Aldis the performer, and it's not good for SmackDown as a show. Authority figures should enhance storylines, not diminish them. They should create compelling drama and conflict, not be sacrificial lambs who get humiliated week after week. WWE needs to figure out how to restore some credibility to the general manager position, or they should just eliminate it entirely, because what they have right now isn't working. So I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Nick Aldis was right to apologize to CM Punk, or was this completely unjustified? Do you think CM Punk is being positioned as a babyface hero, or is WWE accidentally making him look like an entitled villain? Do you think this storyline is compelling television, or is it just frustrating and inconsistent? Because I genuinely want to understand if I'm the only one who sees this as a massive problem, or if other people are just as bothered by it as I am. Wrestling is subjective, everyone interprets characters and storylines differently, but to me this feels like WWE making a fundamental mistake in their storytelling by prioritizing short-term satisfaction for CM Punk over long-term credibility for their authority structure. And if they don't course correct soon, this is going to have ripple effects that hurt SmackDown for months to come.